Hyundai doesn't make all that many models that can be considered potentially class-leading, but the i10 city car has always fitted that description. This improved second-generation contender introduces a level of infotainment connectivity and electronic safety provision that buyers in this class won't expect. As before though, its main draw lies with spacious practicality and in the way that it does the basic things really, really well. There may be more exciting urban runabouts than this on your radar, but there aren't many better ones.
This model, the Hyundai i10, is one of this country's very best-selling city cars. Now, this Korean contender achieved that distinction in its original guise by being very cheap. This second-generation design, though, has consolidated its predecessor's position very much on merit. Here, we're going to look at the facelifted version. One of the interesting things about the market's smallest segment is it's one of the very few in which you can expect the sales leader to also be the best car. Buyers in search of an urban runabout, you see, can't be bothered with the snobby image issues that restrict Hyundai sales in larger market categories, which means that the Korean brand has a real opportunity for sales growth when it comes to vehicles like this. And that is one that the company has grabbed with both hands in the last few decades. Now, true, its early city car efforts, the curiously quirky i10 of 1998 and the post and pat-like Amica that almost immediately replaced it, were better suited to Far Eastern tastes than European ones. By 2008, though, Hyundai was getting the hang of what Western families were looking for. That was the year we first saw the Mark I model version of this i10, a car that offered super mini style in a smaller, cheaper, more agile and more versatile package than anything we'd seen before. Sales took off, boosted in the UK by the government scrappage scheme, and across Europe nearly 500,000 i10s quickly found happy homes. This smarter, more sophisticated second generation model, launched in 2013, has continued this strong showing, but today it faces much tougher opposition from a much wider range of better prepared adversaries. Volume brands like Ford and Vauxhall are now much stronger players in this segment than they were back then. Hence the need for this much improved Mark II Model i10, announced in the autumn of 2016. As a segment leader, it needs to be a standard setter, hence the availability of big car features like a touchscreen navigation system, Apple CarPlay and Android Auto phone connectivity, and camera-based safety systems that deliver things like autonomous braking and lane departure warning technology. In addition, as before, buyers get one of the most spacious contenders in the class and the potential for running cost efficiency that betters most major rivals. It all sounds quite promising, doesn't it? Let's check this car out. Now, there are a few things you'll want to tick off as soon as you get yourself seated behind the wheel of a good city car. And the first is visibility. If you're going to be jinking from lane to lane, you need great all-round sight lines. This i10 scores well in that regard, with good mirrors, windscreen pillars that aren't too obtrusive, and a fairly high seat height. The second point is steering. If there's one thing that instantly takes a shine off a city car, it's a heavy, unresponsive helm. So it's appropriate that the i10's rack is light and easy. It's perfect for low-speed manoeuvring and parking, which is when you'll need the third thing that all tiny urban runabouts really ought to have, a small turning circle. Here it is 9.56 meters, which means fewer than 3 turns of the wheel lock to lock. So if you spot a parking space on the other side of the road, you'll find that this i10 will be able to quickly change course and dive right into it. Another area you might think to be significant in terms of city car segment driving attributes is the ease with which a model of this kind is able to adapt to a life beyond town tarmac. Now, in some ways, the original version of this second generation i10 coped quite well in that kind of environment. It didn't feel too out of its depth on motorways, it wasn't overly affected by crosswinds, and it wasn't ear-splittingly noisy at legal limit cruising speeds. Things that weren't quite so good, though, if the need arose to push on a little through twisting secondary roads. At that point, you quickly realised that the light steering that you'd appreciated so much in the city wasn't telling you very much about what the front wheels were doing. and the suspension, which seemed so well judged for low-speed tarmac tears, got quite unsettled over higher speed bumps, enough to make you quite quickly want to back off, in fact. It would perhaps have been too much to expect these issues to be completely solved by the relatively minor engineering tweaks that were possible as part of this facelift package. Hyundai says that this revised model has a modified steering ratio for a little more feel at the helm and larger front shock absorber bump stops, so the car won't bounce around as much at speed over bumpy roads. To be frank, the differences over what was on offer before are rather difficult to discern, which means that this i10 continues to lag a little behind the standards set by rival city cars like Volkswagen's Up and the Ford Ka Plus, should one of your key priorities in purchasing a car like this lie in the need for a rewarding driving experience. Fortunately for Hyundai, few A-segment buyers have the slightest interest in driving on their door handles. For them, the undoubted urban agility of this little runabout is far more important. It's just 3.6 metres long and only 1.6 metres wide, so it's able to jink through rush hour traffic, and almost any gap alongside the pavement can be considered a parking space. The pedal actions are a bit sensitive, which can initially make low-speed manoeuvres feel a little bit haphazard, but once you adjust to that, there's really not much else to criticise here. As we suggested earlier, the suspension has clearly been designed to suit an urban life, and it proves forgiving enough to deal with all but the worst potholes you'll come across. And it also helps that noise levels are very well controlled by city car standards. Now, you'll want to know about engines. Well, it would have been nice to see Hyundai introduce its high-tech turbo 3-cylinder 1-litre TGDI unit as part of this package of updates, but that's being held back for the next generation version of this car. So this Mark II model i10 soldiers on with the two power plants it was offered with at launch, a 3-cylinder 1-litre 66 PS unit and the 4-cylinder 1.2-litre 87 PS Capet engine that we're trying here. There's not a huge amount of difference between the two when it comes to frugality or performance, come to that. 62 miles an hour from rest takes 14.9 seconds in the 1 litre or 12.3 seconds in the 1.2, on the way to irrelevant top speed maximums of 96 and 106 miles an hour respectively. If you favour the smaller 3-cylinder unit, you'll be given the chance to choose that in a more frugally orientated SE Blue guise that sees an engine stop-start system fitted as standard. If your preference is for the 1.2-litre variant, then your dealer will offer you the option of a 4-speed automatic gearbox, and that's worth avoiding at all costs if you've got any sort of interest in running cost efficiency. There used to be only two ways you could style a city car. One was a small and cute approach that's championed by models like the Fiat 500, and the other represented the more versatile and practical option that was promised by contenders like the original versions of this i10. In the last few years, though, the waters have become muddied here. A number of new segment contenders proving that style in this sector could be practical and that practicality could be stylish. In short, the bar's been raised, and for this improved second-generation i10, Hyundai's penmen realised they'd need to bring us something, well, a touch more characterful. To be fair, they knew that anyway. Smart design already the #1 reason for the company's increasing market share, with models across the range shaped by a flowing so-called fluidic sculpture styling philosophy that now continues here. Does it work? Well, you be the judge. The main styling changes made can be found here at the front, which adopts the more distinctive cascading grille that characterises several of Hyundai's latest models. Up-spec versions like this one get small circular LED daytime running lights in the grille's outer corners, and even smaller front fog lamps built into these now more sharply defined lower corner air intakes. Move to the side and you get a better perspective for the larger than average dimensions of this car by class standards. With 1500 millimetres of height, it's almost as tall as it is wide, and with 3665 millimetres length, it's 65 mils longer than a Volkswagen Up and nearly 200 mils longer than something like a Peugeot 108 or a Toyota Aygo. Visual changes made to this revised model are limited to restyled 14 or 15-inch wheels. We've got the larger rims here and sleeker lower side mouldings for top variants like this one. At the rear, there's an evolved bumper design with a black inlay and round fog lights delivering what Hyundai hopes is a sportier look. The tail lamps have been lightly redesigned too, and as before, there's a subtle roof spoiler and then its neat bee sting style roof antenna. Time to take a seat up front. Now, back in 2013, when this second generation i10 model was originally launched, this interior set fresh standards for city car quality and design. And although some rivals have caught up since, it's still one of the nicer cabins in the segment. Now, if Hyundai could further develop things next time around with a dash of Volkswagen Up or Fiat 500 style character, the ambiance would be even better. For the time being, though, the ambiance can be lifted with optional blue or, as in this case, red trimming for the dashboard and the upholstery. Plus, on this top premium SE variant, the fascia has a more sophisticated feel thanks to the addition of this 7-inch touchscreen navigation system. It's annoying that Hyundai doesn't offer this centre dash monitor as an option further down the range, because it's a feature that could prove a serious purchasing clincher for some customers. Now, bear in mind that quite a number of rivals don't offer a centre dash infotainment screen or the option of navigation at all. Others, like VW's Up, force buyers to strap their smartphones to the dash and use them as a sat-nav, which isn't always convenient and it's certainly more difficult to view. This package includes the Apple CarPlay and Android Auto systems that allow you to duplicate the functionality of your phone onto the facious screen and to use selected apps. Plus, there's a 7-year free subscription to Hyundai's Live Services system, which offers real-time traffic, weather and speed camera position updates. Since most i10 buyers will find themselves stuck with a variant that doesn't include this satisfying media setup, we ought to talk about some of the more fundamental aspects of this cabin too. The seating position, for example. Now, very often in small, tall cars, the designers create extra cabin space by mounting the front seats with rather upright positioning, which can make the driver feel that he or she is perched on rather than in the seat. There's none of that here. In an i10, the positioning is almost as natural and comfortable as it would be in the kind of larger Super Mini from the next class up. But actually, come to think of it, it wouldn't be a lot bigger than this car in terms of all the dimensions that really matter. There are a few minor annoyances though, like the way that the wheel only adjusts for height, not for reach, and the fact that it's rather difficult to adjust the seat height without opening the driver's door. That's where you can adjust it. In an entry-level model, that isn't possible. You have to stretch further up the range to get height adjustment for the seat belt too. What else? Well, the dashboard is as logically laid out as you'd expect from Hyundai, and while some of the plastics are a long way from the fashionable soft-feeling materials that you get on some larger, pricier Super Minis, you know what? It doesn't really matter on a shopping runabout like this. I mean, do you really want to be introducing the weight of a huge slush moulded fascia into a city car? Exactly. Anyway, the key touch points do seem to us to be pretty nicely fabricated, with the steering wheel, the gear lever and the buttons on the dash functioning with greater quality than you'd normally have any right to expect at this price point. In fact, there is an uncannily Germanic feel to them, which isn't surprising when you remember that the fatherland is actually where this car was designed. There's nothing much wrong with the ergonomics either. All-round visibility is aided by this tall windscreen and these relatively slim pillars. Rearward vision isn't quite so good. It's impeded a little by chunky rear C-pillars and the way that the side window line rises towards the back of the car. We also like the way that on variants fitted with rear electric windows, you can operate every window from the driver's door, which is actually quite unusual on a car of this size. Moving on to cabin practicality, you get a huge cubby in front of the gear lever and a glove box that is big enough to hold something other than just the owner's manual and a packet of polos. There are also good-sized cup holders and decently proportioned door bins too, big enough at the front to hold a proper 1.5 litre bottle of water. Now let's take a seat in the rear. Now, that's easier to do here than it is with some city cars, thanks to these wide opening doors and a boxy shape that means you won't have to duck too much if you need to reach in and strap in a child seat. Once you're inside, you'll find a decent level of roominess for this class of car, providing you stick with the carriage of just a couple of adults. True, this sharply rising window line might not prove popular with very small children, but they won't complain about the legroom that's on offer. Even with a couple of 6-footers installed back here, front seat occupants shouldn't have to compromise space to accommodate them. We'd also point out that unless you go for the frugal SE Blue i10 variant, 3 belts are provided back here. Now bear in mind that in city cars from VW, Seat, Skoda, Peugeot, Citroën and Toyota, you only get 2, which could be seriously annoying for family folk. The brands I just mentioned don't give you properly opening rear side windows either, let alone the electrically operated ones that are fitted to most i10 variants. Of course, in a car of this size, there is no chance for a middle rear seat occupant to be in any way really comfortable. But if a trio of adults absolutely have to be carried in a car from this class, they're going to be happier in an i10 than they would be in anything else. As for practicalities, well, there are no storage pockets in the rear seat backs, but both rear doors have bins that can swallow a 0.6 litre bottle. Finally, let's take a look in the boot, where the tailgate rises to reveal one of the largest trunk openings in the segment and a 252 litre total boot capacity that's one of the very biggest in the class. Now that's easily enough to equal the Volkswagen Up and its design clones. Again, we're veering into super mini territory here. That figure's just 10% less than you get in something like a Vauxhall Corsa, and more pertinently, it's around 50% more than you get in a popular city car like Toyota's Aygo. Now, one caveat we must mention is that the figure I just quoted applies only if you've opted for a variant lacking a space-saver spare wheel. Now, if one of those has been included, as here, then the capacity figure falls to a rather less noteworthy 218 litres. Either way, there's a fairly high boot lip to negotiate, and there's quite a drop from it to the boot floor, but the cargo area itself is deep and broad, and it should easily accommodate something like a full-size baby buggy. Entry-level models don't get this useful boot light, and if you need more room, then pushing forward the 60/40 split folding rear seatbacks will provide it. Annoyingly though, it is not possible to do that before first pulling up the rear seat base. Once you've done that, the seat backs do lie flat. They do have, I believe, a step in the boot floor. Total capacity in this configuration is 1,046 litres without a spare wheel, or 1,012 litres if you have got one fitted. This Hyundai i10's range and pricing structure is pretty simple to get your head around. There's one 5-door body style and the choice between 2 petrol engines, a 66 PS 1 litre 3-cylinder unit and an 87 PS 1.2 litre 4-cylinder power plant. With the 1 litre variant, there's the option of a frugally focused SE Blue version, and go for the 1.2 and you get the option of an automatic gearbox. Prices meet the common segment standard, so they range from around £9,500 to just under £14,000, spread across 4 trim levels, S, SE, Premium and Premium SE. Got that? Good. So what kind of value proposition are we talking about here? Well, a pretty good one, despite the fact that these days Hyundai no longer seems to feel any sort of need to undercut its main rivals on price. So the figures being asked for the base 1 litre 3-cylinder i10 model are very similar to those being asked for entry-level 5-door versions of rivals like the Volkswagen Up, the Skoda Citigo and the Toyota Aygo, all of which have the drawback of only being able to seat 4 people. Plus, the figures are also similar to the prices being asked for the cheapest versions of competitors like the Ford Ka Plus, the Renault Twingo, the Fiat Panda and the Kia Picanto, which all cost slightly more to run. Far fewer city car rivals can match the asking price of the 1.2 litre 4-cylinder i10 variant we're trying here. Go for the next engine up in, say, a Peugeot 108, a Renault Twingo, a Skoda Citigo or a Volkswagen Up, and you could easily find yourself paying around £1,500 more than you'd have to find for the 87 PS version of this Hyundai. Of course, there are cheaper options in this segment if you really want them. Something like a Dacia Sandero would actually cost you quite a lot less, but it would feel cheaper too. As for other bargain basement brand models like Suzuki Celerio and the MG3, well, if you sweat the stats, you'll actually find they won't save you that much over a comparable i10 when fitted with the air conditioning that most buyers will want. If, having considered all of that, you conclude that it is an i10 that you really want, then you're going to need to know just what's been included in the standard equipment tally. And the answer is a reasonable amount. Even the entry-level S model comes with daytime running lights, central locking, electric front windows, a trip computer and a decent quality CD stereo with 2 speakers plus USB and aux-in connections. Most buyers, though, will want to shed the hair shirt and find themselves the extra £750 to at least treat themselves to mid-range SE spec. Here you get air conditioning, a DAB radio, cruise control with a speed limiter, powered heated mirrors, a perimeter alarm, a multifunction steering wheel and the no-cost option of much brighter blue or red interior trim. Plus, at this point in the lineup, there are fewer of the penny-pinching emissions that characterise entry-level i10 motoring. So with an SE trimmed i10 you'll get a height adjustment for the driver's seat and a couple of extra speakers so you can hear that stereo properly. Plus your rear seat passengers won't have to wind up their windows by hand and you'll be able to see what you're doing in the cargo area thanks to the provision of a light in the boot. Space saver spare wheel is also included too, though you'll lose that if you go for the frugally focused SE Blue variant. City car buyers, though, are increasingly wanting a greater selection of niceties than that. So with this facelifted i10, Hyundai has responded to that trend by offering a couple of plusher variants. Now the premium model delivers 14-inch alloy wheels, front fog lights, LED daytime running lights, privacy glass, climate control, leather for the gear knob and the steering wheel and a smartphone docking station. To get what is arguably the most significant interior addition in this revised model, though, you have to stretch to the top premium SE trim level that we're trying here. Now, the feature in question is a 7-inch colour touchscreen navigation system, which comes with Apple CarPlay and Android Auto smartphone connectivity, plus a 7-year free subscription to Hyundai's live services system, which offers real-time traffic, weather and speed camera position updates. Other premium SE additions include larger 15-inch wheels, a powered glass sunroof, rear parking sensors and heat for the front seats and the steering wheel. Not enough? Well, then have a look at the options list. On most city cars, this consists of floor mats, mud flaps and a paper bag to pop on your head so that your friends won't spot you driving the thing. But this i10 has some genuinely useful extras to choose from. You can put alloy wheels on the lower trims and rear parking sensors are also offered. Although if you struggle to park an i10, you really ought to send your licence back to the DVLA in Swansea. Practical touches you could add include body side mouldings, plus for the inside there's LED footwell illumination and a coat hanger that clips onto the front seat backs. Plus you will be able to make better use of the boot area by adding things in like a protective floor mat and a dog guard. On to safety. Now, Euro NCAP docked the original version of this car a star in their testing because not all of the available safety aids were supplied as standard. And to some extent, that is still the case. The difference now, though, is that the things you have to pay extra for are items you wouldn't expect to find on a city car at all. Now, providing you avoid entry-level trim, at point of purchase, you'll be invited to find £275 more for a driver assist pack, and that will give you 2 significant camera-driven features. Forward collision warning is one of those autonomous braking systems that scans the road ahead as you drive, looking for potential collision hazards. If one's detected, you'll be warned. If you don't respond, or well, perhaps you aren't able to, then braking will automatically be applied to decrease the severity of any resulting accident. And the second pack element is lane departure warning, and this is a kind of setup that will alert you if you drift out of your lane on the highway. Otherwise though, standard safety provision is pretty much as you expect it to be from a modern city car, although it is a pity you have to stretch to the premium models to get hill start assist control and the automatically activating ESS, emergency stop signal system, that flashes the hazard warning lights to warn following motorists when you slam on the anchors. Safety features that are fitted across the range include twin front, side and curtain airbags, tyre pressure monitoring, ISOFIX child seat fastenings, ABS with brake assist and a latest generation ESP stability control system. One of the reasons that previous i10 models have been so successful is that it takes a lot to better Hyundai when it comes to cost of ownership. Satisfied owners will tell you that the i10 proposition is about a whole lot more than just a 5-year warranty with a car thrown in for good measure, but there is no doubt that that comprehensive after-sales package does remain a major attraction for city segment customers. It's a really good unlimited mileage deal that also includes annual vehicle health checks and roadside assistance to add peace of mind. After all, urban driving is just about the toughest thing you can subject a car to, with lots of starting and stopping, gear changing and routinely poor surfaces to put the suspension through the mill. Economically, you need to know that it's not going to throw up any unpleasant surprises. You do, though, also need running cost figures that prioritise clean frugality to the point of penny-pinching meanness. Now, the lineup's green-minded champion, the 1-litre SE Blue variant, certainly seems to deliver on that score. It's the only model in the range to feature an engine stop-start system, and it also has an optimised fifth gear ratio, an improved continuously variable valve timing system, and a specially cooled exhaust gas recirculation package. Thanks to all this, an i10 SE Blue can improve on the running cost figures of a standard 1-litre derivative by around 15%, delivering 70.6 mpg on the combined cycle and 93 grams per kilometre of CO2. Now, that can't rival the class-leading showing of a Suzuki Celerio 1-litre dual jet, but it is a fraction better than the figures you get from most other city car rivals. Unfortunately, there are a few drawbacks in choosing an i10 SE Blue model though. It costs £400 more than a standard SE variant for a start, and that's a premium that might not make a lot of sense if most of what you're planning to do with this car will involve merely driving to the shops and back. Plus, you can't have a space-saver spare wheel, and rather inexplicably, you can't have a centre rear seatbelt either. Bearing all that in mind, we'd probably be minded to opt for the standard i10 model fitted with the 3-cylinder 1-litre engine. One of those will deliver 60.1 mpg on the combined cycle and 108 grams per kilometre of CO2. Now, that means a VED-B tax band and a better-than-kind tax rating of 18%. Overall, that's a mid-class style showing, so better than rival versions of the Ford Ka Plus, the Renault Twingo and the Fiat Panda, but not as good as comparable versions of the Volkswagen Up and the Peugeot 108 and all their various clones. What about if you need a little more power? Well, rival city car models are still able to provide that from a downsized 2 or 3-cylinder engine. So in those cases, the efficiency penalty you pay to get that extra performance isn't too great. Now, that will also be the case in the next generation version of this car, and that's likely to feature the impressive 3-cylinder 1-litre TGDI unit that's used in Hyundai's larger i20 Super Mini. For the time being though, this Hyundai i10 must soldier on with the old tech 87 PS 4-cylinder 1.2 litre unit we're trying here. It manages 57.6 mpg on the combined cycle and 114 grams per kilometre of CO2, which isn't much to write home about, but it's not any worse than you manage in a comparable 87 PS Ford Ka Plus. We do have to point out the need, though, to try and avoid equipping this 1.2 litre engine with automatic transmission. Do that and the running cost figures plummet to 47.9 mpg and 139 grams per kilometre, which really isn't great for such a small car. Insurance groupings, well, they stand at 2 for the 1-litre model and either 6 or 7 for the 1.2, depending on whether you specify premium trim or not. Residual values are very class competitive too. After 3 years and 60,000 miles, an i10 1-litre SE will still be worth £3,500, which will equate to 34% of its original list price. That is significantly better than comparable models like Renault's Twingo and Peugeot's 108, and in fact only Volkswagen's Up and Skoda's Citigo do better in this class. Combine those factors with the relatively efficient running cost figures we've already mentioned, and you'll probably emerge, according to industry experts CAP, with a pence per mile running cost figure of just under 30 pence. That's a penny or two better than a comparable Volkswagen Up. Servicing costs are helped by the inclusion of features like a maintenance-free long life timing chain. Hyundai offers 3 levels of prepaid servicing packages. Most buyers choose either the 2-year 20,000 mile deal or the 3-year 30,000 mile package, but if you plan to see a bit more of the world in your i10, there's a 5-year 50,000 mile deal too. City cars have evolved. These used to be models people went for because they had to. Now, so often, they're little runabouts customers own out of choice. For all the industry plaudits the affordable little first generation i10 received, it wasn't a car you'd ever have felt especially joyful about owning. But specified correctly, this improved second generation version might well be. The changes that the Korean brands made to this facelifted model aren't especially far-reaching, but they do have considerable showroom significance. Find us another car on the market that can offer autonomous braking, touchscreen navigation and Apple CarPlay, Android Auto phone connectivity for not much more than £13,000. Well, you'll be looking a long time. Here we have an A-segment contender that's now almost everything it needs to be, and pretty much everything a model of this kind can be. Yes, it is a pity it's not as cheap as the original first generation model was, and it's certainly true that a few rivals are a little more enjoyable to drive. Otherwise though, this i10 is not only as frugal, clean and practical as you'd want, but in this improved form it also has a little more polish and technology thrown in for a more complete European feel. Other direct competitors can offer some of these things too, but do your sums on the spec and you'll find that nearly all of them are more expensive. Which wouldn't be an issue if they were delivering lower running costs, stronger build quality or more interior space than this i10 can offer, but they're not. This Hyundai can now either match or beat its rivals in all these areas, which means if you're shopping in this segment, you have to consider it.